Greetings, everyone. This is Michael Chan of the Faith and Firearms Project. At the Faith and Firearms Project, we study the intersection of guns and religion in America. And what you're watching today is actually a review video of a particular article that I found, the one that you can see right in front of you, called "Guns in a Culture of Idolatry." And this article was found in a publication called The Lutheran, which is a regular publication put out by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, otherwise known as ELCA. And the article we're looking at today is from November 2014. Just a little bit of background about the author, Reverend Peter W. Marty. Here's his own page. I'm not going to go into many details about who he is, but as it says, he's a pastor, writer, and a speaker. He's a pastor at a Lutheran church in Iowa. This is a website for the magazine itself, thelutheran.org, and you can find more information there. Unfortunately, the article itself isn't available free online. It is subscription-based, but you can, I think, buy these individually for just a couple of dollars. And this particular review will have to do with an article written by Peter Marty. Just by way of reminder, the reviews that I do on this particular channel are not meant to be critical reviews, in the sense that don't expect at the end that I'm going to say, okay, this is good, this is bad, or this is what I like about this is what I don't. The purpose of this channel is not to be evaluative, but rather to present all kinds of documentation and interviews and reviews that manifest this intersection of guns and religion. So, in today's the review will be on this article titled "Guns in a Culture of Idolatry in the Lutheran" by Reverend Peter Marty. So let's dive into this review right away. The first thing that I want to draw your attention to is this kind of disclaimer that Reverend Marty makes at the very beginning. And this, in terms of how it's all laid out, this is at the very top of the page. It would be the first thing that a person reads, and it's italicized to kind of set it out. He says, "Dear readers, if upon the conclusion of this column you believe I am advocating for the confiscation of all guns, you have misread my words. Friends and relatives of mine who hunt know my level of respect for thoughtful gun ownership. This article is about the danger of letting the gun become a cultural idol. Most gun owners in America believe public safety and personal freedom aren't exclusive or contradictory ideas, but complementary ones, so read on with sensitivity. I hope these paragraphs stimulate good conversations for you." So he's obviously trying to kind of short circuit some caricatures that he perceives that some of his readers might kind of hear in his argument, that he's not interested in gun confiscation. He's interested, as he claims, with gun safety, and with kind of starting a conversation around having a safe gun culture within America. So that's his own disclaimer that he makes. And what I'm going to do now is lay out 6 points that I hear in his argument. The first point is this. This is the opening paragraph. I'll call this point enough. Here's the quotation. "Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords had a one-word response to the December 2012 killings of 26 children and adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Enough. This column is my own quiet enough to the silence about gun violence that blankets too much of the Christian community. I simply want to help navigate the challenging conversations that can surround our attempt to talk about gun violence from a faith perspective." So here you see him kind of identifying with the enough of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, and then he then goes on to say that what he's really interested in is helping people kind of navigate this very complicated conversation, and to do it specifically from a faith perspective. So that's where he begins this whole conversation, and if he draws attention, of course, to the tragic events in December 2012 at Sandy Hook Elementary. The second point that he makes is that, and here I think you begin to see not just his critique, but also maybe some of his ideals or some of his hopes. He says, once upon a time, people elected to express most emotions through things like poetry, conversation, dance, argument, or a therapist, but through a gun. And so one of the first kind of criticisms that he brings to bear against the about the gun conversation is that he thinks that culturally people now are more accustomed to seeing the gun as a way of expressing emotion. And so he kind of paints this picture of a time past when people chose to express their emotions through less violent means, or things like poetry and, as he says, conversation, dance. And so I think, like I said, I think we get a bit of a glimpse here into Marty's hopes, and also his critique of the current culture and of the role of guns within the current culture. Point 3, more guns, less crime, question mark. Here's the quote: conventional wisdom has long argued that only violence can control violence. If you don't want the bad guys to be able to do harm, you need to put more guns in the hands of the good guys, said one Arizona state senator after Giffords was shot. When everyone is carrying a firearm, nobody is going to be a victim. Or we could add, everybody is going to be a victim. So here we see Marty taking up a contentious issue within the gun debate, having to do with whether more guns make for a secure society, and his response is quite clearly no, and he says in fact that more guns means that everybody is going to be a victim. So from his perspective, more guns results in more victims, not fewer victims. So that's his third point. He kind of polemicizes here against a claim that is often disputed within the gun conversation in America, namely that more guns either result in more crime, depending on your perspective, or less crime, again, depending on perspective. But he's going to interact with that negatively. Point number 4, guns are a religious issue. Opposing gun violence isn't primarily a political issue, or at least not for believing people. For Christians and others, it's a deeply religious issue. The value, worth, and dignity of every human being is unmistakably precious. Faith asks us to stand for this preciousness and alongside everyone who dies by violent means. To stand with such ones is to stand with that champion of nonviolence named Jesus. Now, at this point, I want to raise some interesting connections between Marty's article here and an interview that I did some months ago. I'm going to navigate now to the interview section of the website, and the interview that I did with Jim Atwood. Here we are. On 2/27/15. I'm not going to show it, but I commend it to you because I think what you'll find is that Marty and Atwood have some similar claims to make, and some supplementary claims to make, claims that kind of augment one another's arguments. And this is one where the two of them have some deep agreement, namely that they both think that that guns need to be addressed from a religious perspective. Or another way of saying is that both of them think that religious people and religious leaders have something to say about gun violence. Point 5, guns as idols. And here's yet another point where there are some interesting connections between Marty's article here and also Atwood's, in that both of them draw on this idea of idolatry, and in fact both of them even use Martin Luther, the Reformer, as a source. I don't quote. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I do here. In this quote he does refer to Martin Luther. So here's what he says. Among many Americans, the gun now claims nearly divine status. Our fascination with its powers, that's my typo, that's not his, with its powers has turned it into a small g God. If Martin Luther's definition of a God has any enduring truth to it, a God is that to which we look for all comfort and take refuge in every time of need, the gun has risen to achieve godlike prominence. You don't question a God that requires human sacrifice and guarantees your security and safety. You revere this God even when it can't sustain such guarantees. You enshrine its divinity in an impenetrable temple called my rights. So this is a very dense kind of quotation here, and it's also very polemical. There are a lot of polemical undertones here. The first thing, of course, it has to do with the fact he's claiming that for many Americans, he doesn't say all, but he says for many, the guns have turned into a god with a small g, or maybe that's a synonym, I think, for him of idolatry. And then he draws specifically commenting on Martin Luther, not King, but Martin Luther the Reformer, on his definition of idolatry, which has to do with a thing to which one looks for comfort and safety and refuge. And in Marty's perspective, guns have become as much for many Americans. And then he makes another really interesting move where he, if I read him correctly, he kind of makes this interesting connection between guns and gods that require human sacrifice. I'm not entirely certain I'm reading him correctly, but I think that he is making this almost this claim that it's not just that he's saying that guns for many are an idol, but they're a certain kind of idol, an idol of a kind of God that would demand a human sacrifice. And such God has been protected, he claims, or enshrined, he claims, behind the issue of my rights, or he's probably talking specifically about the Second Amendment here. So that's point 5, that for many, he claims, guns have become an idol. And then finally, the very last point that he makes in his last few paragraphs is that he makes this call to a call to repentance. He says, Jesus had a word for this, and every other idolatry no one can serve two masters. Following Jesus can be our inspiration for repenting of our national temptation to view guns as sacred. So he ends with this call to repentance and ends by quoting Jesus from a teaching of Jesus that has to do with money, but he's kind of transporting it into this conversation about guns to say that no one can serve two masters, one being Jesus for him, and then the other being guns when they serve as an idol. So that's basically the review of Marty's article. It's relatively short and found, in fact, on only one page within the Lutheran. But I think within that article, I detected those 6 points, and I want to invite you after this brief video to maybe leave a comment down at the bottom. I only ask that whatever comments you leave, they need to be respectful, and they need to draw on some kind of evidence. If you appreciate what Marty is saying or want to qualify it or perhaps criticize it, that's great. The purpose of this website is to generate that kind of conversation. So I think please leave comments. Make sure they're respectful. Make sure they're grounded in some kind of evidence, or grounded perhaps in some kind of sacred text or an authority that is maybe sacred or authoritative or important for you. Please feel free to do that. Just make sure that it's respectful. If you come across any other articles like this, or books or anything that you think I should review or talk about, please email me at faithandfirearms007@gmail.com. Or if you have any other comments about the website, critical, positive, otherwise, again, email me faithandfirearms007@gmail.com. Thanks for watching this review. I hope it was informative, and thanks for participating in this conversation.